The Bold and the Beautiful has never been short on shocking revelations, betrayals, and the kind of emotional gut punches that keep audiences hooked day after day. But the events leading into Friday, September 26, 2025, have pushed every major player in Los Angeles to the brink. With relationships shattering, long-buried secrets spilling into the open, and lives tilting off balance, the stage is set for episode 9619 to deliver a combination of heartbreak, confrontation, and impossible choices that fans won't be able to look away from. What began as a series of choices made in secrecy has now exploded into public reckoning, and the fallout is shaking families and alliances to their very core. For Will Spencer, the weight of his actions has become unbearable. His affair with Luna, born out of deception and weakness, was a mistake he never intended to make, but the consequences are undeniable. On that night when he was too drunk to know Luna wasn't Elektra, the line between reality and betrayal blurred. At first, he clung to denial, but piece by piece the truth came crashing down until he had no choice but to admit what happened. When he confessed everything to Elektra, the woman who had believed in him, the woman who had envisioned a future with him, it detonated their love. Elektra's fury and heartbreak were not only just a feat they cut Will down to nothing. Still, Will couldn't stop himself from reaching out, desperate for one last chance to explain, to hold onto her even as she slipped through his fingers. His calls, his messages, his pleas weren't about denial anymore. They were about survival. He knows that if Elektra walks away for good, he has nothing left but shame. And in Friday's episode, we see him trying once more, leaving messages, showing up at her door, begging for just a moment to speak. His desperation isn't manipulative, it's raw. He is a man drowning, reaching for the one hand that might still pull him back from the edge. But Elektra has no reason to make it easy. Will's betrayal wasn't just about sex. It was about trust, about identity, about being replaced in her own love story. And what makes it worse is Luna. Luna isn't just Olivesia's pregnant. That revelation gutted the Spencers and set off waves of shock through every family connected to them. Bill and Katie confronted her, horrified not only that she was alive after being presumed gone, but that she carried the kind of secret that could tear their family apart forever. Bill, always the pragmatist, demanded proof, and when Luna's pregnancy was confirmed, the weight of reality became undeniable. Katie counseled Will to keep quiet, to protect himself, to let time cool things down before acting rashly. But Will, unable to lie to Elektra, chose to reveal everything. That choice cost him his relationship. And on September 26th, we see him dealing with the fallout, desperate for reconciliation, but staring down the possibility of permanent loss. Meanwhile, the chaos around Luna is only one piece of a much larger storm. Deacon Sharp has found himself blindsided by his wife Sheila Carter yet again. The man who thought he had finally built something solid is now grappling with the realization that Sheila had been hiding a life-altering truth. Luna is alive. That single revelation reopened old wounds and left Deacon questioning every moment of trust he had given Sheila. If she could lie about something so monumental, what else had she concealed? His rage was volcanic, his marriage shaken to its core. And yet, Sheila stood by her actions, justifying them as necessary to protect their life together. Deacon, torn between his love and his fury, reached a breaking point. In Friday's episode, he becomes the focus of another confrontation, but this time it comes from an unlikely source, Taylor Hayes, who has endured her own heartbreak and humiliation, still reeling from Ridge's sudden marriage to Brooke after having been engaged to him herself, has poured herself back into her work as a therapist. But her dedication to healing others doesn't mean she's blind to the storm brewing around her. When she looks at Deacon, she sees a man teetering on the edge of collapse, consumed by anger at Sheila and unable to process what's happening in a healthy way. In episode 9619, Taylor takes a risk, confronting Deacon and urging him to step away from Sheila to find counseling elsewhere, somewhere neutral, away from the toxic spiral he's caught in. It's not about judgment, it's about survival. Taylor knows what happens to people who stay in Sheila's orbit too long, and she sees Deacon headed toward total destruction unless he chooses another path. The show's brilliance lies not just in these explosive individual storylines, but in how they weave together, creating a web of consequences that ensnare everyone. The truth about Luna's pregnancy doesn't just affect Will and Electra, it reverberates across Bill and Katie's lives, complicates family loyalties, and even casts shadows over Douglas. As Hope fears the boy will once again be dragged into a maelstrom of family scandal and custody battles. The chaos between Deacon and Sheila doesn't just stay contained in their marriage. It touches Finn, who is horrified by his stepmother's deceptions, and it drags Taylor back into confrontations she had hoped to leave behind. Each revelation feeds another, until no one in Los Angeles is left untouched. Friday's episode promises to highlight these fractures in sharp detail. We'll see Will reaching out to Electra, his voice heavy with desperation, his eyes hollow with guilt, his entire future hanging on whether she can find even a sliver of forgiveness in her heart. We'll see Taylor and Deacon in a battle of wills, as Taylor pushes him to recognize that his marriage to Sheila may be unfixable, that healing might only be possible if he walks away. And through it all, the looming questions remain. What will Luna's pregnancy mean for the Spencer family? What further lies might Sheila be hiding? And who will survive the fallout as past choices ignite present wars? The bold and the beautiful thrives on the clash between love and betrayal, truth and deception, loyalty and ambition. On September 26, 2025, in episode 9619, those themes reach a boiling point. Will's plea to Electra may fall on deaf ears. Taylor's counsel may be ignored by a man too wrapped in his own anger. Families may fracture beyond repair. But one thing is certain, the consequences of every choice will echo for months to come. And in a city where image and legacy are everything, the truth is the most dangerous weapon of all. The foundation of Forrester Creations has always been built on image, legacy, and control. But as truth continues to claw its way out of the shadows, even the strongest walls are crumbling. The revelation that Thomas Forrester is not Ridge's son, but Eric's biological child detonated like dynamite through the family and the company. Yet just as the Forresters began grappling with what that meant for their future, a new crisis struck that no one was prepared for: Eric's sudden decline. His health, already fragile after months of uncertainty, plummeted overnight in the wake of the scandal. What was meant to be a stabilizing force to his name, his leadership, his authority turned into another fracture line threatening to destroy everything. Doctors confirmed that Eric was in a precarious state. Stress had triggered complications that left him too weak to manage day-to-day affairs. And yet in the haze of illness and looming mortality, Eric insisted on one final act of control. He summoned legal counsel to draft an urgent codicil to his will. Though he could barely lift his hand, though his voice shook, he signed the new addendum in front of witnesses. The terms shocked everyone. Thomas would be given a safety key to power within Forrester Creations, an emergency mechanism to secure his position as Eric's heir. But it would only activate if he survived the bone marrow transplant that now defined his future. It was both a gift and a curse, a promise wrapped in uncertainty. If Thomas lived, he would hold undeniable authority. If he didn't, the company would be thrust back into chaos. The news of the codicil spread like wildfire. For the board, it was a nightmare. Investors began pulling out. Stock prices slipped as whispers of instability circulated across the market. Forrester Creations, once synonymous with stability and elegance, now seemed fragile. A family empire that had long projected perfection was being exposed for what it truly was: a dynasty at war with itself. Panic set in among shareholders, forcing the company to call an emergency press conference to address the growing rumors before the fallout could spiral further. But the tension inside the walls of the company was just as explosive as the headlines outside. Quinn Fuller's unexpected return only stoked the fire. The woman who had once been Eric's wife, who had fought her way into the family and then been exiled from it, walked back into the chaos at the very moment when suspicions were tearing the Forresters apart. Some whispered that her timing was calculated, others that it was coincidence. But no one believed Quinn ever did anything without motive. Almost immediately, questions began to swirl. Had Quinn played a role in the original cover-up of Thomas's paternity? Was she part of the machinery that had buried the truth decades ago to protect the Forrester name and preserve the Empire's image? Her silence at first was telling, and when pressed, Quinn neither confirmed nor denied her involvement. That ambiguity was enough to plant seeds of mistrust that spread like wildfire through an already paranoid family. Taylor confronted Quinn directly, unable to contain her fury. "Were you part of this? Did you help Eric hide the truth from me?" From Thomas. From Ridge, Quinn's response was calm, almost cold. "What do you think would have happened if the truth had come out back then?" "The scandal would have destroyed the company." "Maybe Eric made choices you don't like, but everything he did to protect Forrester. If I supported that, it was because I believed in protecting what he built." Her words only added fuel to the fire. Was Quinn admitting guilt? Or was she still playing her signature game of manipulation, keeping everyone guessing and divided? For Steffi, the codicil represented the most direct threat to her leadership yet. As CEO, she had fought tooth and nail to establish herself as the rightful head of Forrester Creations. But with Thomas now positioned as Eric's true heir, and with a legal mechanism waiting to activate should he survive his transplant, her authority suddenly felt fragile. She couldn't ignore the clause it was Eric's will. Written in black and white, but she also couldn't afford to relinquish control when investors were already spooked and the press smelled blood in the water. She argued fiercely in closed-door meetings that Thomas's safety key should be kept confidential, at least until his health stabilized. "The market can't know," she told Carter and the board. "If this leaks, it'll confirm every rumor that we're collapsing." But secrecy had already proven impossible in a family like the Forresters, where every whisper eventually found its way into the spotlight. Ridge, meanwhile, was spiraling. Still reeling from the discovery that Thomas was not his son, he now had to face the fact that Eric was transferring power away from him, not just emotionally but legally. The codicil was a public erasure of Ridge's role as heir apparent. He lashed out, demanding that Thomas's rights under the codicil be frozen until legal review confirmed its validity. "My father signed this while he was barely conscious," Ridge argued. "How do we know he understood what he was doing? How do we know this wasn't Quinn whispering in his ear? Or Taylor pushing her agenda? We can't just hand over the company because Eric scribbled a signature while he was weak." His accusations only deepened divides, pitting brother against sister, son against father, and stirring long-buried resentments. Brooke saw opportunity in the chaos. While Ridge fumed and Steffi defended her throne, Brooke began working behind the scenes to position RJ as the future. She argued that Thomas's codicil was a gamble, hinging entirely on his survival, while RJ represented stability and continuity. She whispered to Ridge that Eric's decision wasn't final, that the board could be swayed, that investors wanted someone young and untainted to symbolize the next generation. For Brooke, it wasn't just about power, it was about cementing her family's place in the company's hierarchy once and for all. But Hope had her own crisis to manage. Watching Thomas get swept into a battle for control while fighting for his life filled her with dread. She feared that Douglas, once again, would become a pawn in the war. If Thomas emerged from his transplant, he would rise as the rightful heir, and Douglas would be expected to follow in his father's footsteps as the next Forrester prince. Hope, desperate to shield her son from the chaos, pleaded with Thomas not to drag Douglas into the line of fire. But Thomas, torn between his role as a father and the demands of his legacy, could promise nothing. "This isn't about me anymore," he told her. "This is about the future of the family. Douglas is part of that whether we like it or not." The press conference was scheduled in haste, designed to calm investor panic and reassure the public that Forrester Creations remains strong despite the family drama. But even as Carter prepared his carefully crafted statement, the fractures were impossible to hide. Rumors swirled about Eric's declining health, about the codicil, about Quinn's sudden reappearance. Reporters circled like vultures, eager to expose every weakness. The company's stock dipped further in the hours before the conference began. and analysts openly questioned whether Forrester Creations could survive another round of scandal. Behind the scenes, the family was no closer to unity. Steffi and Rich clashed over strategy. Brooke lobbied for Jay's prominence. Quinn's shadow loomed, her motives still unclear. Taylor pressed for accountability, demanding that Eric face the truth before it was too late. And Eric himself, lying frail in his bed, had no strength left to referee the war he had inadvertently unleashed. His codicil, meant to protect Thomas and the company, had instead set off a chain reaction that threatened to tear everything apart. The future of Forrester Creations now hinged on Thomas's survival, on whether he could live through the transplant and step into the role Eric had carved out for him. If he did, he would become the most powerful man in the family, armed with legal authority no one could deny. If he didn't, the codicil would vanish with him, leaving the company's fate to be fought over by the same fractured family that had been at war for decades. And so, as the cameras prepared to roll and the press gathered for answers, one thing was clear: the world was watching a dynasty unravel in real time. The Forrester name, once untouchable, was now on trial. Every secret, every betrayal, every choice from the past was colliding in the present, and the future of the empire was hanging by a thread.